There's a moment I keep coming back to. My granddaughter Emily standing at the kitchen doorway, barely 16 years old, her eyes wide and wet, whispering words that didn't fit the house I'd spent 50 years building. "Grandpa, run. They want everything." I was 79 years old. I had worked that land before she was born. I had outlasted a war, a drought that nearly broke us in '83, and the death of my wife Margaret 2 years prior. I did not run, but those 3 words made something click into place that I had been refusing to hear for months. If you're watching this from the beginning, I want to be honest with you before I go any further. This isn't a story about a confused old man who got taken advantage of. This is a story about a man who saw what was happening, decided to be still, and then decided to move. Subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what happened next changed everything, and not the way my son Dale intended. My name is Arthur Mercer. I was born in rural Tennessee, the second of 4 children, to a man who farmed other people's fields his entire life and never once complained about it, which was both his greatest strength and his greatest sorrow. My father had nothing to leave behind when he died. No land, no savings, no deed with his name on it. Just a worn-out pair of work boots and a reputation for honesty that didn't pay anyone's bills. I swore before I turned 20 that I would not follow the same path. Not because I wasn't proud of him, but because I knew he deserved more and never got it, and I wasn't willing to let the same thing happen to me. I started working at 16, hauled timber in the summer, drove equipment on construction crews through my 20s, did roofing and fencing and whatever else came along that paid honestly. I saved the way poor men save, carefully, quietly, with no margin for mistakes. At 31, I bought 40 acres of hill country outside of Cookville that everyone else said wasn't worth the asking price. Rocky soil, overgrown fence lines, a creek that flooded twice a year. I saw something in it that I couldn't fully explain then, and still can't now. I proved them wrong. I built a house on it with 2 of my cousins over the course of 3 summers, working weekends and vacations, framing walls and pouring concrete with our own hands because we couldn't afford to pay anyone else to do it. I planted a garden the first spring. I cleared pasture and kept a small cattle operation for 15 years. I raised my 2 children there. When Margaret and I sat on the porch in the evenings watching the light go flat and gold over those ridge lines, we didn't need to say a word to each other. We both understood exactly what we had built and what it had taken out of us, and why it had been worth every bit of it. That land was not a financial asset. It was the evidence of a life that had been lived with intention. My son Dale is a practical man. Always has been. He studied business, moved to Nashville with his wife Pam, built a decent life for himself. I was proud of him. After Margaret passed, Dale and Pam came around more. Weekends, phone calls, doctor's appointments they insisted on attending. I accepted their help and I was grateful for it. Grief makes you lean toward warmth even when something in the warmth doesn't feel quite right. I didn't examine it too closely. I should have. It started with questions. Reasonable ones at first. Had I updated my will? Did I have a power of attorney in place? Did I know what the land was worth in today's market? I answered openly because he was my son, and it didn't occur to me to protect information from my own son. Then came the paperwork. One Sunday afternoon, Dale came in with a folder and sat across from me at the kitchen table, that same table Margaret and I bought in 1977, and explained that there were some estate documents that needed to be in order. Something about avoiding probate complications, protecting the property from taxes if anything were to happen to me. He told me it was routine, that their lawyer had drawn it up, that a lot of people in my situation were doing the same thing. My reading glasses were in the other room. Dale summarized the key points. He showed me where to sign. I signed. I signed the way a father signs things for a son he trusts, the way a man signs something he believes is being done on his behalf. What I actually signed was a durable power of attorney that gave Dale full legal authority over all my assets, including the property. Not a transfer of ownership, something more patient than that. A document that let him make every decision about my land and my finances while I remained the owner in name only. It was built to hold, and it was built to last, and I had handed it to him at a kitchen table over sweet tea on a Sunday afternoon. The months that followed were the most quietly humiliating of my life, and I have known hard times. I have worked in ice and heat and gone to bed with my hands torn up and still gone back the next morning. I have sat with my wife through a cancer diagnosis and held her hand through every part of what came after. But there is a particular kind of pain that comes from being erased inside your own home by people you raised or people you welcomed, and it is different from any other kind because it is designed to look like care. Dale started making decisions about the property without asking me. He had a contractor come out to assess the structures, told me it was for insurance purposes, that he was trying to make sure I was protected. He spoke to a realtor about a neighboring parcel without mentioning it to me, and when I found out through the neighbor's wife, he had an explanation ready. Always calm, always patient, always reasonable. He had a talent for making you feel that questioning him was the unreasonable thing. Pam was harder in a different way. She had that particular gift some people carry, making you feel like a burden while maintaining the face of someone doing you a favor. Art, you've done enough for this family. Let us handle things now. As if handling things was the same as owning them. As if the man who built the house should be grateful to sit quietly in it. At family dinners, the ones on holidays or when the grandchildren were around, they seated me at the head of the table for the photographs. In the pictures, I look like what I am, the patriarch, the elder, the man the family gathers around. What the pictures don't show is that by the time the food was on the table, I had already been talked around, talked past, and talked over enough times that I had stopped trying to participate. I noticed things I had been explaining away for months. The look Dale and Pam exchanged when I brought up a decision about the property. The way a certain kind of conversation went quiet when I walked into a room that had been active 30 seconds before. One evening I overheard them on the back porch, voices low but carrying through the screen door the way voices do in country quiet. I heard a specific date. I heard the word closing. I heard something about getting it done before the end of the quarter. I didn't catch every word, but something old and stubborn in me, the same thing that had kept me standing through drought years and hard winters and grief that had no clean end, came fully awake. And then came Emily. My granddaughter had been staying the week while her parents were away for work. She had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's sense of when something was wrong. She found me on the porch after Dale and Pam had gone inside, sat next to me in the other rocker, and after a long, quiet moment she said, "Grandpa, run. They want everything." I saw the papers on the table. They're signing something next week with the property lawyer. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. I put my hand over hers. I told her we were going to be fine. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't go inside and confront anyone. I sat there until the stars came out and the frogs started up from the creek, and I thought, what would you have done? Would you have walked back in there that same night, documents in hand, and said your piece? Would you have called a lawyer in the morning and made it loud and fast? I understand those instincts, but think about it while I tell you what I did, because what I did was quieter than anyone expected from a man who had just been told his son was taking his land. I said nothing that night. I watched them drive away from the kitchen window, and then I sat down at that table, the same table where I had signed the document Dale had put in front of me, and I stayed there a good while without moving. Then I went to bed, lay in the dark in the room where Margaret and I had slept for 38 years, stared at the ceiling, and thought with more deliberate care than I had applied to anything in years. The anger was there. It was deep and clean and fully earned, and I am not the kind of man who pretends otherwise. But underneath the anger was something colder and more useful. The recognition that if I reacted from the anger, I would lose. Dale had the legal knowledge. Pam had the tactical patience. What I had was the one thing they had stopped accounting for. They had decided I was already finished. They were moving with the confidence of people who believe the outcome is settled. And a man that his opponents have stopped watching closely has already won one important thing. The next morning I asked a neighbor I trust, Earl Hutchins, to drive me into town. Told Dale I had a prescription to pick up. Earl took me to the office of a woman named Patricia Hale, an attorney I had been referred to years ago and never needed until now. She was sharp, direct, and she did not waste my time. I laid out every detail I could remember. She asked precise questions. When I finished, she looked at me and said what I needed to hear. If you weren't properly informed of the scope of that document, we have grounds to challenge it. I need to see everything you signed. What followed were 2.5 weeks of careful, invisible work. Me in the house, behaving exactly as before, eating dinner with Dale and Pam when they visited, answering their questions with the same steady slowness I always had, letting them believe the old man was still in the dark, that everything was on track, that the finish line was in sight. Meanwhile, Patricia was examining every document, consulting with a colleague who specialized in elder law, reviewing the circumstances of the signing. She found what she needed. The power of attorney had procedural deficiencies in how it was executed and witnessed. More importantly, there was a documentation trail showing I had not been given adequate time or independent legal counsel to review the document before signing. That gave us standing. We filed to revoke the power of attorney on a Thursday morning. The same day, Patricia filed a motion to freeze any transfer of the real property pending review. Dale didn't know. Pam didn't know. They were still moving toward a closing date, certain the old man was asleep at the wheel. People who get too comfortable in their certainty stop watching for the things they're sure won't happen. The following Monday, they arrived at the house with a real estate attorney to finalize a related document. Dale came in easy, confident. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had signed the original paperwork, and he asked if I was ready. The attorney opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. He accessed his firm's system. His expression changed. He excused himself and made a phone call in the hallway. When he came back, he told Dale in a flat, professional voice that there was an active revocation of the power of attorney and a legal hold on the property, that he could not proceed with any transaction until the matter was resolved through the courts. Dale looked at me. I looked at him. I didn't say a word. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water from the tap, the same well water I'd been drinking for 40 years. That was all. The months that followed were not simple. Dale tried negotiating first, called me directly, came by the house, left messages with a calm tone that didn't match what he was trying to accomplish. When that didn't produce what he wanted, he shifted. He raised the question of my mental competency, claimed that a man my age, acting without legal guidance, might not have fully understood the implications of revoking a document he had previously signed. It was the sharpest thing he had ever aimed at me, and it landed the way he intended, not because I believed it was true, but because I knew my own son had calculated exactly how to wound me, and had chosen to use it. Patricia handled the response with the kind of efficient thoroughness that comes from having seen this particular move before. The revocation was upheld in full. The competency challenge went nowhere. After everything was resolved, the property was placed in a properly structured trust, with Emily named as the primary beneficiary, subject to clear conditions. The land would remain my legal residence for the duration of my lifetime. No transaction or transfer involving the property could proceed without independent legal oversight, and the terms could not be altered by any single party. Emily cried when I told her. I held it together until she left. There are some things you keep for when you're alone. I had spent months carrying something very heavy and very quiet, and the night it was over, I sat on the porch and listened to the creek, and let myself feel whatever needed to come through. Grief and relief often feel the same at first. You can figure out which one it is later. I still live on those 40 acres. The garden is going in again this spring. Tomatoes, beans, the same pepper variety I've grown for 20 years because I know exactly what it needs. The porch still needs a board replaced on the east side. It's been needing it for 3 years now. And I keep finding other things to attend to first, which I think says something true about what we choose to leave unfinished. Some things stay exactly as they are, regardless of what changes around them. The hills don't adjust themselves. The creek doesn't negotiate. Emily drives out on weekends when she can get free. She's 17 now, taller, quieter, in a different way than she used to be. She doesn't bring up what happened, and neither do I. We've said everything that needs to be said between us, most of it without words. We sit in the rocking chairs her grandmother picked out at an estate sale in 2003, and we watch the light move over the ridgeline the way it has moved over it every evening of the decades I have lived here. The silence between us is the good kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that means something rather than hiding the absence of it. I don't carry bitterness about what Dale did. I've thought about this carefully because I wanted to be honest with myself about it. Bitterness is a kind of holding on disguised as righteous anger, and it costs the person who holds it far more than it costs the person it's aimed at. I made a decision, somewhere in those quiet evenings after everything was settled, to let it be what it was, without letting it define what comes next. That doesn't mean I pretend it didn't happen, or that it left no mark. Those are different things entirely. What I do carry is something I didn't have before, a clearer, harder-edged understanding of where I stand, what I'm made of, and who in this world is actually standing with me. Emily is standing with me. That 16-year-old girl who came to me in a kitchen doorway with shaking hands and honest eyes chose to tell me the truth at personal cost to herself. I think about that often. I think about what that kind of courage looks like when it's still young and untested. At 79, with those hills still out there doing what hills do regardless of what happens on the ground below them, that turns out to be more than enough. If you stayed with me through all of this, I'll leave you with one question before I go. What are you still waiting to look at directly? Because the thing we decide not to see is rarely as dangerous as the moment we realize we've been not seeing it for too long. I waited longer than I should have, but not so long that I couldn't act. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.